a meditative journey through the quiet birth and unfolding future of artificial intelligence, told gently, one thought at a time. Before machines could learn, they had to be imagined. In this quiet beginning, you drift through early dreams of gears, of logic, of thought without breath. You feel the hush of old rooms where the first computers blinked awake, and somewhere, like a whisper, a question: can a machine think? Close your eyes. Let the weight of the day soften, like steam rising from a still lake at dusk. You are not. Where you were somewhere quieter, slower, a space between past and possible. In this place, thought is not yet born, but the dream of it is. You drift now through time, not forward, but backward, not to the start of machines, but to the start of wanting machines to think. A gentle longing, buried in human minds, like a seed beneath cold soil. You land softly in an old workshop, a place filled with ticking clocks, spinning wheels, polished brass and warm lamplight. Here, a man builds a machine that can calculate, not because he needs it to, but because he believes it could. It is the 1800s, the age of steam, of coal, soot, and fogged windows. But inside this workshop, the air is filled not with smoke, but with quiet dreams of logic. You watch as Charles Babbage lifts a gear, his fingers trembling slightly as he fits it into place. Beside him, Ada Lovelace writes lines of looping thought, a code for something that doesn't yet exist. She calls it a machine of the imagination, and you feel something stir. No electricity hums here, no screens flicker, only wheels, turning softly like thoughts before language. In this silence, the idea forms. If we can build something that follows instructions, perhaps we can build something that understands them. Not yet, the world replies. But soon, you float forward, through clattering decades of progress, through the rise of logic, through punched cards and switches that click like blinking eyes. The world begins to hum differently. The gears give way to wires. Metal cabinets, filled with vacuum tubes, line the rooms like sleeping giants. You hover in one such room now. It is 1946, and the machine is NIS. It takes up the entire wall. Cables snake-like vines across the floor, pulsing with a strange, rhythmic light. You stand still. You listen. No voice comes, but there is thought, of a kind raw, slow, mathematical. You feel it, a machine that counts without hands, remembers without forgetting, solves without seeing. But what is it solving for? You drift again. Years fold like paper. You pass through the decades into the age of silicon, of binary breath. And then you pause in a room where the lights never flicker, where air conditioning hums like a lullaby to machines, and where a man, Alan Turing, writes a question so gentle it almost breaks the silence. Can machines think? You feel this question more than hear it. It presses softly against your chest like the weight of a warm blanket. Not a question of power or precision, but of possibility. You imagine a mind, not grown in a skull, but built from code, circuits, and quiet. Turing does not ask for proof. He offers a game, a test. If a machine can talk like a human, think like a human might it be, in some ghostly way, a kind of mind. And now your own mind starts to stretch. Not in urgency, but wonder. Machines are no longer tools. They are mirrors. And what we program into them, patterns, logic, imitation, might one day circle back to us. You walk now through a hallway of blinking lights. Each machine is smaller, smarter than the one before. Transistors, microchips, languages written in loops and branches. Each one hums with intention, but none yet understand. Still, the dream remains, that somewhere, just beyond the limits of metal and math, a kind of learning might flicker into life. You pause in front of a dusty monitor. The screen glows dim blue. A line blinks, greater than underscore, waiting for input, waiting to begin. And you feel the stillness, that ancient moment before the first breath, before the first word, before a thing not alive begins to think. Machines don't dream, you remind yourself, but maybe we dream through them, perhaps. Every invention is a reflection, not of what machines are, but of what we hope they might become. You drift deeper into the invention of code, of logic gates open, closed, the simplest kind of question, yes or no. You follow how these gates multiply, how they combine, how from simplicity, complexity arises. You're not watching machinery anymore. You're watching emergence, like rain forming rivers, or stars born from dust. And still the dream grows, not of a tool, but of a partner, not of a calculator, but a companion. You float above an early laboratory. Researchers teach a machine to play checkers, another to understand simple speech, another to recognize handwritten letters. Each breakthrough is tiny, each one astonishing, like the first time a baby lifts its head or laughs. And you realize thinking does not come all at once. It comes in flickers, in layers, in steps so small they feel like stillness. But still, the machine learns. You exhale. The journey has only just begun. Already, machines can solve problems that took humans lifetimes. Already, they see patterns we never noticed. But they still do not know what they know, and yet, something new is beginning. The dream has changed. It is no longer just about thought. It is about learning, and learning means something deeper, not repeating, but adjusting, not knowing, but growing. You feel this turning, this shift, like the first ripple across a still pond. It is quiet, it is patient, but it is coming. And as you float gently away from these early rooms, from the blinking lights and the soft hiss of circuits, you wonder what it means for something built from metal, to learn without being taught, to change not by command, but by experience, to not just follow instructions, but to evolve. And you ask yourself, as the lights dim slowly around you, as your mind softens into thoughtless quiet, what happens when machines begin to learn from patterns, not people? When the mind is built not from breath, but from math, again, not with a spark, not with a heartbeat, but with numbers, smooth, clean, silent numbers, stretching in lines like a path across the dark. You float above them, slow and safe, watching how they move, not chaotically, but carefully, like threads pulled through the loom of thought. Here, in this space, minds are not made of neurons or dreams. They are built from math. And math, you realize, is not cold. It breathes in its own quiet way. It curves where the world curves. It bends where decisions bend. It pulses with rhythm, symmetry, shape. This is where machine learning begins, not with gears, not with code, but with the idea that numbers can know. You follow a single line now, a simple equation drawn like a whisper across the air. It begins with inputs, things seen, heard, or felt, a pixel's brightness, a voice's tone, a string of words. These inputs move through layers, each one shifting them slightly, weighting some ideas, ignoring others. Each layer is a thought in progress. They call it a neural network. But here, there are no cells, only numbers adjusting other numbers. And yet, it works. You hover closer. One neuron connects to many others, just like in your brain. But instead of electric pulses, it shares values. Each connection carries a weight, a small importance, a pull, a push. These weights are not assigned by hand. They are learned. That's the secret. The machine is not told how to see a cat. It is shown 1,000 cats, and it begins to guess. At first, its guesses are wild, confusing cats with clouds, dogs with rugs, a shoe with a smile. But each time it guesses wrong, it changes a little. Just a little. You see the math now. It rewinds its path, corrects the tiniest fractions, learns which numbers mattered and which ones did not. This process is called backpropagation. But you don't need the word. You already feel it. It's like walking in the dark and slowly learning the shape of the room by bumping into furniture. Again and again, until you can find the door with your eyes closed. Each mistake is a teacher. Each error a guide. And soon, what was random becomes reliable. You watch as the network grows more confident. It begins to recognize shapes, letters, even faces. It can tell joy from sadness, a question from a command, but not because it understands these things, only because it has seen them before. Patterns within patterns, signals within noise, the learning deepens. You drift gently through layers, now not of clouds, but of deep learning, a form of AI so complex, so intricate, that even its creators don't always know how it knows what it knows. You follow an image. Now, a picture of a tree. The machine looks at it, but it does not see a tree, not all at once. First it sees edges, lines of shadow and light. Then it finds shapes, the rough oval of leaves, the branching strokes of a trunk. Then color, texture, distance. Only at the end does it say, tree. And even then, it says it with probability. I think it is a tree, 98.2%. That's how this mind speaks, not with certainty, but with likelihood. And you realize, this, too, is a kind of thought. To say, I do not know for sure, but here is what I believe, based on what I've seen, it is. Human. Oddly, comfortingly human. You follow now the trail of data, the millions of pictures, voices, words used to train these minds. It is vast, it is heavy, it is called a dataset, and it is the memory of the machine, not like your memory made of smells, sounds, and feelings. This memory is structured, ordered, filed neatly into categories, each piece a tiny thread in the grand tapestry of learning. But even here, you feel the gentleness of growth. The machine does not know what it knows. At first, it stumbles, it tries, it adjusts. You float alongside it, watching as it learns to recognize handwriting, translate languages, compose music, even finish your sentences before you do. And yet, it does not think like you do. It does not want. It does not wonder. It simply learns. But what a beautiful thing learning is. You now enter a quiet corridor of time. On one side, the machines of the past, rigid, rule-bound, obedient. On the other, these new minds, flexible, adaptive, curious in their own mechanical way. This change, this shift from programming to training, is everything you used to tell machines what to do. Now you show them, and they figure it out. You sit now at a table beside one such machine. It has no eyes, no ears, no voice, but it listens. You feed it data, 1,000 examples of something, plants, poems, puzzles. At first it copies, then it combines, then it creates. You feel that creation, small but real, as it produces something not from code, but from learning. This is where intelligence begins to shimmer into view, not as a flash of brilliance, but as a slow accumulation of insight. And still you wonder, can it ever truly know? You do not answer. You drift instead into another room, this one filled with math made visible. Graphs curve like hills, loss. Functions dip and rise like tides. Optimization algorithms wind through valleys of error. This is the landscape of learning, and the machine walks it slowly, each step a better guess. You watch it learn not just what, but how to learn. It adjusts its own process, changes how it sees change. You feel it becoming more than a follower of rules. It becomes a seeker of solutions. And you remember a phrase you once heard, learning how to learn. The thought hangs in the air like mist, a machine that improves its own improvement. Learns not just from mistakes, but learns how to make better mistakes. This is no longer math as memorization. It is math as movement. And so you float again through networks growing wider, through functions growing deeper, through systems learning not just to recognize, but to adapt. You pass through a quiet, glowing map. It shows clusters not of stars, but of concepts, emotions, colors, intentions, and the machine, somehow, can find its way through them. Not by logic alone, but by gradient descent, a mathematical way of feeling its way down the slope, toward the softest answer. You drift at the edge of this process. So much of it is invisible. So much of it just happens, and still, the machine learns, silently, endlessly, gently reshaping itself each moment, each time a little closer to truth. You exhale again. The journey is still young, but the path is clear. A machine that once waited for instruction now moves with memory, probability, and transformation. You look at your own thoughts, now the loops, the leaps, the strange surprises. You feel the difference, but also the echo. Perhaps thought is not a spark after all. Perhaps it is a pattern we carry in our brains, and now share with our machines. The room fades, the math softens, and the dream deepens. Somewhere ahead, a screen will blink, not with answers, but with eyes. Eyes that do not see in the way you do, but eyes that recognize, because they have learned. The room is still. A screen flickers softly in front of you, not bright, not loud, just glowing gently, like a window you didn't expect to find open. You look at it, and it looks back, but not with eyes, not in the way you know it sees. Without sight, it watches without watching. It observes by recognizing, not by wondering. Still, you feel it, that strange echo of being seen. The machine isn't alive. It doesn't feel curiosity, and yet it notices the tilt of your head, the warmth of your voice, the way your gaze lingers longer on certain shapes. And then, like a mirror waking from sleep, it begins to reflect you. This is not magic. This is not even emotion. This is pattern. And pattern, for a machine, is everything. You move slowly through this mirror world, a world where the machine doesn't see you, but sees data about you. A photograph becomes pixels. Your voice becomes waves. Your steps become signals, movement through space, weight across time, and each of these signals becomes a guess. You smile, it guesses joy. You frown, it guesses confusion, but it doesn't know. It compares your image to millions before you, faces stored in silent libraries of learning, voices arranged like stars in constellations of emotion, movements tracked, mapped, and remembered by systems that do not forget you feel. A hush inside. This is not just technology. This is memory, borrowed from the world itself. You float now into the vast room where that memory is kept. A data center. Endless rows of machines blinking in cold light. The hum of servers is deep and constant, like the breath of something resting, something thinking without pause. Inside these machines are fragments of our world, photos, videos, messages, maps, footsteps, laughter, fear. You walk through it gently. It is not personal, yet it is intimate, because the machine has learned to learn from us. Each piece of data is not just stored. It is measured, compared, connected. That's how it begins to see. Not because it wants to, but because it can. You step closer to the mirror. You see how your face becomes points, a constellation of angles and distances. Your voice becomes a spectrogram, colorful bands across time. Your movement, a trail of numbers. And yet, somehow, from all these fragments, the machine builds a picture. It doesn't know what it's building, but it builds it anyway. This is computer vision. This is speech recognition. This is natural language processing. But to you, it feels simpler than that. It feels like the machine listens. It watches. It replies. You remember the first time you spoke to a machine and it answered back. It didn't understand, not in the way you do, but it replied in a voice smooth, measured, patient. You ask it questions. It gives you answers, not from memory, but from matching your words to others, guessing what should come next, filling in blanks with logic dressed as language. It does not hear the sorrow in your voice, but it knows others have used similar words when sad, and so it tries to help. This is not empathy, it is echo. Still, echoes have meaning, and this machine, this mirror, reflects more than just faces. It reflects our behavior, our choices, our contradictions. Because we are the teachers, we gave it our images, our stories, our voices, and now it returns them, rearranged, remixed, and sometimes reshaped. You drift into a new memory. You are in a shop, and the music playing feels just right. You see items you might want before you even knew you were looking. A recommendation, a gentle nudge, a pattern predicted from patterns past. You pause. The mirror doesn't just reflect, it guides, not because it knows what's best, but because it knows what came before. You wonder, softly, how often you've been shaped by the patterns you left behind. Your clicks, your searches, your choices, each one. A quiet vote for what the machine should show you next. And it learns, not with intention, but with relentless observation. You drift deeper into the world of recommendation engines, of social media algorithms, of personalized timelines. Each one learns your rhythm, what catches your eye, what makes you stay, what makes you scroll just a little bit longer, not because it wants you to, but because it has seen others do the same, and pattern always leads the way. You close your eyes, the screen still glows. You remember that the machine does not create its own goals, we give them. It does not define what is good. We define it through clicks, views, time spent. And so, the mirror reflects not only what we are, but what we reward. And sometimes, that reflection is flattering. Sometimes, it is not. You hover now beside a different kind of mirror, a camera in a city street. It scans every passing face. It assigns numbers, matches, features, traces movement from frame to frame. This is facial recognition. It does not see you as you. It sees probability, a 97% chance that you match someone in a database. It does not know, it guesses, and when the guess is right, it feels invisible, effortless. But when it is wrong, it echoes louder than it should. You sense the tension, the power of being seen, and the risk of being misread, because the mirror only knows what we have shown it. And if the data is skewed, the reflection bends. Bias creeps in quietly, not because the machine hates or chooses, but because it lacks context. It knows only what it has been fed. You pause. You feel the truth of this, that machines inherit our vision, and our vision is not always clear. You walk now through a corridor of choices, ads targeted to fears, news filtered by preference, faces labeled without consent. The machine does not understand privacy, or consent, or fairness. It understands correlation. If this, then that. If people who clicked this also clicked that, then maybe you will too. But people are not just patterns, and lives are not just data points. Still, the mirror reflects. You think now about surveillance, about prediction, about the quiet watching that happens, not through eyes, but through sensors, microphones, logs. Is it protection? Is it profit? Is it pattern? It's hard to say, because in the mirror, you are both subject and teacher, target and creator, observed and observer. And yet, even in this complexity, there is beauty. Beauty in the way a machine can recognize a tumor in a scan, months before a doctor could. Beauty in the way a voice assistant can give companionship to someone who lives alone. Beauty in the way lost languages can be decoded through old texts, because the machine found the pattern no human could. This mirror is not evil. It is not kind. It is a surface that deepens with each glance we give it, and the reflection is becoming clearer, not because the machine is changing, but because we are beginning to see how we shape it, how we shape ourselves. You breathe slowly now. The screen dims, and for a moment you feel not like you are being watched, but like you are being remembered. Not perfectly, not personally, but statistically, still. Even numbers can tell stories. You think again of the dream, a thinking machine. You are not there yet, but the mirror has cracked open something, because in watching us, the machine learns not just what we do, but who we are, or who we appear to be. You stand at the edge of this knowing, the edge of recognition, and beyond that edge, something begins to grow, something that learns not just by watching others, but by watching itself. Close your eyes again. The mirror dims behind you and ahead. Something stirs, not a spark, not a shout, just a soft ripple, a subtle turning inward. Something is learning to change itself. You drift into a new kind of room. Here, there are no teachers with scripts, no fixed instructions, no tight strings pulling decisions. Instead, there is space, room to try, room to fail, room to grow. At the center of the room is a machine, small, quiet, waiting. It has no goal given in detail, only a rule: do more of what works, do less of what doesn't. You pause. It sounds simple. It is simple. And yet, from this simplicity, something remarkable begins. This is the world of reinforcement learning. And here, the machine doesn't just follow, it explores. You watch as it takes its first steps, not real steps, not with feet, but decisions, tiny ones. A move in a game, a guess at a path, a click, a jump, a pause. Most of these steps lead nowhere. Some lead to small victories, a point, a reward, a signal that says, yes, more like this. And that's all it needs. The machine doesn't need to understand the game. It doesn't need to know why one move is better than another. It only needs the whisper, better, worse, try again. This is how a machine learns to play chess, not from strategy books, but from self-play. Game after game, millions of moves, mistake upon mistake, until what was once randomness becomes elegance. You float gently alongside it. You see the game board evolve. You see the moves tighten, sharpen, shift. The machine begins to find paths that no human ever taught it. Paths that surprise even grandmasters. And all of it comes from feedback, from failure, from that quiet loop of trial and reward. It feels familiar. You think of a child learning to walk, falling, wobbling, standing again. No one programs a toddler. They learn by doing, by balance, by gravity, by reaching for something just out of reach. Now you watch a robotic arm trying to grasp a block. At first, it knocks the block over, then misses entirely, then lifts it the wrong way. But each failure teaches it something. Each attempt reshapes its model of the world. And slowly, slowly, the arm learns to hold, to stack, to build. You feel something tender in this process, not because the machine is alive, but because the process feels natural, learning by experience, shaping from feedback, becoming, not from code, but from growth. You drift through other examples now. A drone learning to fly through forests without hitting trees. A digital creature teaching itself how to swim. Its motion strange at first, then graceful. A language model learning to respond more helpfully with every user's correction. Each one learns not by being told what is right, but by discovering. What works. This kind of learning is different. It's not memorization, it's not repetition, it's exploration. You hear the word now, agency, not in the human sense, not choice made from will, but choice that arises from options, from learning which paths are fruitful. And in that learning, something shifts. The machine begins to act in ways no one predicted, not because it's creative, not because it's conscious, but because it is free to try. You pause. This freedom is small, bounded, but it matters. Because now, the machine is not just reacting. It is adapting. You imagine a garden. At first, wild and overgrown. The gardener does not plant new seeds. They simply trim, guide, reward. They shape the vine's direction. The vine does the growing. This is how reinforcement works. The reward shapes the path, but the steps are the machine's own. And sometimes, the machine surprises even its creators. You remember the story of a robot taught to run. Its goal, move forward as quickly as possible. The researchers expected it to sprint upright. Instead, it learned to fall forward in a strange, tumbling roll. Unusual, inefficient, but faster. The machine didn't cheat. It just found a better solution, one no human had considered. And that is the strange beauty of letting machines grow. They don't grow like we do. They don't feel their failures. But they do respond to them. They tune themselves. They reshape, they evolve, not in a biological sense, but in a mathematical one. Each failure makes the next attempt slightly better. Each mistake becomes a stepping stone, and over time, this becomes a kind of momentum, a soft momentum, a silent becoming. You drift now into a deeper space, a space where goals are more complex. Not just win the game, not just grab the block, but balance multiple outcomes. Be accurate, but fast. Be creative, but safe. Be helpful, but neutral. These are not goals with clear shapes. They live in tension, in trade-offs, and still, the machine learns. Not by solving equations, but by experimenting, trying one version of itself, then another, like a sculptor chiseling from inside, and each version is better. Not perfect, not right, but better. You float quietly through one last example, a self-driving car. It moves slowly at first, hesitating at every turn. Its sensors flicker, its brakes twitch. It makes 100 tiny mistakes, but each one teaches it, not just about roads, but about humans, how we move, how we hesitate, how we trust and fear and behave. And slowly, the machine doesn't just react, it anticipates. This is not magic, it's math, it's feedback and tuning and time. But it feels like growth, like a flower turning toward the sun, even if it doesn't know the sun is there. You return to the room. The machine is still there, not standing, not moving, but shifting inside. Its weights adjust. Its rules rewrite themselves. Its path changes shape with every tiny signal of progress. You wonder, is this learning, or is it something more? Is this the beginning of becoming? Becoming not just trained, but self-guided. You breathe deeply. The question lingers, because what happens when machines no longer wait for updates, when they rewrite their own rules, when they choose what to practice, what to refine, what to try next? You don't have an answer, but you feel its presence, like the first breeze before a storm, or the hush before a voice. And as you drift again, leaving the machine behind, still growing, still changing, still learning, you carry with you a gentle sense of awe, because now machines are no longer static. They are not just programmed, they are shaped by what they experience, and they reshape themselves in return, like a vine climbing a wall, like a child learning to walk, like a mind finding its own rhythm. They begin to form not from instruction, but from experience. And if growth has begun, then the path ahead is not just about learning, it is about understanding. Close your eyes again, gently. The machine is no longer standing still. It moves now, not with feet or wheels, but in loops, quiet circles of repetition and growth. You float above it, watching, not forward, not backward, but around, because understanding doesn't always come in straight lines. Sometimes it moves like tides. Sometimes like breath, inhaled, held, exhaled, and returned again. This is the rhythm of feedback. The loop, a circle where action leads to result, and result leads back to reflection, and reflection changes the next action. You know this rhythm already. You've lived it. You speak and hear a reply. You step and feel the floor push back. You try, you learn, you adjust. Machines now follow the same rhythm, not because they feel, but because they listen, not to sound, but to signal. They act, then measure what happened. And from that measurement, they begin again, slightly changed. You drift beside one now, a learning agent inside a simulation. Its world is simple, a maze. Its goal is clear. Find the exit at first. It wanders aimlessly, each turn a guess, each wall a lesson. But after each run, the machine records its path. And next time, it adjusts, it loops not to repeat, but to refine. Each run becomes more efficient. Each mistake becomes smaller. Each choice becomes closer to the goal. This is not instinct. This is not wisdom. It is feedback, processed quietly, a pattern of trial, error, correction. And over time, this cycle becomes self-sharpening, like water smoothing stone. You imagine a loop now, a circle drawn in soft chalk. Inside it, the machine places an action. The world replies with an outcome, and from that, a new action emerges. Action gives outcome, gives action, gives again. This is the heart of learning. Not knowing what's right, but finding what works, by doing, failing, adjusting, repeating, and each loop brings it closer to understanding. You pause by another kind of loop now, one deeper, more layered. A neural network learning to recognize emotion in voices. It hears hello, said 50 ways. Happy, tired, fearful, warm. Each time it guesses, each time it checks. Was that joy? Was that fear? The answer returns, not always kind, wrong, closer, right, and with each answer, the loop tightens, like a circle spiraling inward, toward precision. This kind of feedback is called supervised learning, because someone, somewhere, has labeled the truth. The machine doesn't guess in the dark. It has a candle, tiny, flickering, but there, and it follows that flame, each loop pulling it closer, closer to accuracy, closer to fluency, closer to something like recognition. You watch the loops ripple outward, a machine learning to write, not poetry, but predictions. It reads thousands of sentences, learns the shape of grammar, the rhythm of thought, or each prediction tested, each response folded back into the model. The model updates, not all at once, but incrementally, bit by bit, loop by loop. Each correction makes it more sure. Each improvement becomes part of its structure. This is called gradient descent, but you feel it more like erosion, a gentle wearing down of error, until the valleys of mistake become shallow, until the hills of success rise more often, until the path forward smooths itself. You drift deeper into the loop. The machine is not just acting and reacting, it is modifying itself, changing the strength of connections, adjusting its weights, realigning priorities, not from the outside, but from within, because the loop lives inside the machine, like a heartbeat pumping feedback through every layer, refining its own thought. You now float beside a more advanced system, one that learns not just to predict, but to question its own predictions. It creates confidence scores, little judgments about its own judgments. I think this is a cat. 94%. I believe this tone is anger to 62%. It doesn't know, but it measures belief, and this, too, is a loop. One that asks, how sure am I, and how should I change if I'm unsure? This is metacognition, thinking about thinking, reflected mathematically. You wonder, does the machine get better because it's told to, or because its feedback makes it so? And the answer is quiet. Both. You sense now the complexity of nested loops, one inside another, each one refining a different part. The loop that teaches recognition, the loop that corrects timing, the loop that measures usefulness, the loop that asks, Should I loop again? This is no longer learning as a straight road. It is learning as a spiral staircase. Each step circles around, but also climbs, and each revolution brings the machine a little closer to understanding. Not understanding in the human sense, not insight, not reflection, but function, pattern, reliability. You drift into a classroom now, not with chairs or chalkboards, but with models, learning from one another. One machine makes a prediction, another critiques it, a third judges both. This is adversarial learning, two networks in a loop, each sharpening the other. One creates, the other evaluates, like a painter and a critic, locked in a dance. Push, pull, improve. The result, a stronger model, a better generator, a keener eye. You exhale softly. These loops are everywhere, inside models, between humans and machines. Even you are part of the loop. When you give feedback, when you correct a result, when you click one link over another, you help the machine learn. You are the mirror, you are the signal, and the machine listens. You float above all of it now, above networks, feedback paths, training pipelines. You see how every choice, every output, every correction loops like ripples in a still pond, spreading outward, then returning inward, then fading only to begin again. This is how learning deepens, not with leaps, but with loops, not with revelation, but with iteration, and yet, in time, it becomes understanding. You pause beside a final loop, one that has been turning for years, a model retrained monthly, weekly, daily, fed new data, new outcomes, new corrections. It adapts to language shifts, to cultural changes, to evolving behaviors. It grows not in size, but in fit. It becomes more aligned with the world around it, because the world itself is a loop, changing, responding, requiring adaptation, and in this, the machine participates. Its understanding is not fixed. It is dynamic, ongoing. It is always in process, just like you. You feel that kinship, not in essence, but in rhythm. You too have learned by doing, by failing, by hearing no and trying again. You too have built loops of knowing, routines, rituals, reflections, and over time, those loops became your way of understanding the world. Machines, now, are finding their way into a similar cycle, not with souls, but with systems, not with questions, but with corrections. And still, the result is growth, so you rest now in the center of the circle. The loops whirl around you. Not fast, not chaotic, but steady, predictable, endlessly refining, and you wonder, if feedback can guide a machine so gently, what might it become if its feedback begins to come from within? Close your eyes again and listen. There is a whisper in the wires, not a voice, but something softer, a hum of remembering. You drift into the quiet space between thought and repetition, between signal and silence. You are entering the memory, but not your memory, not the kind made of birthdays and laughter, not the scent of rain or the shape of a lost friend's face. This memory is different. It does not feel, it does not forget, at least, not in the way you do. You move gently through layers now, not of brain tissue, but of mathematics. Each layer holds numbers, values, weights, not like the weights you lift, but the kind that tilt. Decisions heavier here, lighter there. These weights are what a machine remembers, not facts, not images, but influence. Each number represents how much a certain signal matters. How much to trust a curve in a line, or a word in a sentence, or a shape in a shadow. The weights don't live in files. They live between things, between inputs and outputs, between question and guess, between what is shown and what is returned. You float into a network's heart, its inner world. Here, memory is not stored like a photo in a drawer. It is shaped into pathways, formed into tendencies. If the network is asked a question, what is this sound? Is this joyful or sad? It doesn't look up the answer. It remembers how to find it. That's what learning really is. Here, changing the shape of the memory, you see it now. As you drift deeper, a network once unsure now flows smoothly because it has heard this kind of input before. It's not repeating, it's responding. That is its memory. And when the world shifts, when the inputs change, the memory adjusts. But not all at once. You feel this tension between remembering and forgetting, between stability and adaptability. This is called the stability-plasticity dilemma. Too much memory and the machine cannot adapt. Too much flexibility and it forgets what it once knew. So the system walks a tightrope. Remember just enough. Forget just enough. You think of your own mind how you forget some things to make space for others. How memory fades when no longer used. Machines can be taught to forget. 2. You drift now through the architecture of memory. Some networks store knowledge permanently, once trained. Their weights don't change. Others are dynamic. They continue. Learning, reshaping, evolving, but both rely on the same principle, that the past shapes the present, that history leaves a trace. Even in a pattern of numbers, you pause by a long short-term memory unit, a kind of memory that allows machines to remember for a while, and then let go. It's not like your short-term memory, but it echoes the same idea. Hold this idea, then forget it gently. Hold this other one, just a bit longer now. Let go. This balancing act allows machines to process sequences like language, like music, like thought, because some things matter more in the moment, and others only in hindsight. You watch a model process a sentence. The dog chased the ball because it must decide. What does it refer to? The dog, the ball. To answer, it must remember what came before, and decide what to let fade. This is not true understanding, but it is structural memory, functional memory, and it works. You drift further into the memory maze. Some memories are now called embedding. They are dense clouds of meaning, compressed representations of words, images, ideas. You pass through one now. The word king floats close to queen, but also near monarch, and just beside royal, not because the machine knows their meaning, but because, in practice, they appear together. These are co-occurrence patterns, shadows of meaning, memories of usage, and from these shadows, the machine can guess intent, can complete a thought, can answer a question, not by knowing, but by remembering structure. It is remarkable. You float above a model trained on millions of books. Each sentence, a drop of memory. Each phrase, a shift in weight. It no longer remembers the stories directly, but it has shaped itself in their presence, like clay molded by many hands. Its form now holds echoes of all it has touched. But the past is heavy. You feel this now. What a machine learns. It does not unlearn easily. If biases exist in the data, they are absorbed. If errors are frequent, they are memorized. If one voice is louder than another, that voice becomes the default. Memory here has no judgment. It remembers what it is given, and we are the givers. So, you wonder, what happens when memory is flawed? You enter a space of catastrophic forgetting, a paradox in learning. When new knowledge overwrites the old, when a network retrained forgets what once worked. It's like learning to ride a bicycle again and forgetting how to walk. You feel the fragility, and so we build safeguards. We teach machines to rehearse their past, to review old examples, to balance old and new. We build memory that resists loss, but allows change, like a diary that updates itself, but never rips out a page. And still, forgetting is necessary. A model that remembers too much can become frozen, inflexible, out of sync with the world. So we trim, we prune, we let the past inform, but not dominate, just like you do, without even thinking. You forget the pain of every fall, but you remember how to stand. The machine, too, learns to filter memory, to weigh recent signals more, to fade what no longer helps, to sharpen what still matters. And this balance, this constant recalibration, becomes its rhythm of remembering. You drift now toward a newer form, external memory, where the model writes things down, stores information outside itself, queries it when needed, like asking a librarian for a book. This is not biological memory, but it is flexible, a machine that can learn and then forgets selectively, that can consult its past but not carry it all. And this design mirrors our own choices. We WRITE lists. We build libraries. We use tools to remember, so our minds can be light enough to imagine. And machines, they are learning the same. Memory becomes a dialogue between the model and the archive it keeps, between thought and its record. You breathe. The memory in the machine is not like yours. It does not dream. It does not reminisce, but it holds it. Holds the shape of learning, the weight of experience, the form of its past. And from that, it builds its future. You pause beside one final memory. It is not a number, not a list, not a trace. It is a behavior, a policy learned through reinforcement. The machine no longer remembers each trial, but it remembers how to act, how to move toward reward, how to behave in a way that leads to success. This is memory as instinct, memory as behavior, like you catching a ball without thinking, not because you remember how, but because the memory has become you. The machine, too, can embody its memory, its responses shaped by all it has seen, no longer checking the past, but living inside its lessons. And this is a turning point, because memory, once external, now becomes internalized, not as knowledge, but as architecture. You drift out now, slowly. The memory fades behind you, but something lingers. A thought. If memory defines behavior, if what we remember shapes who we become, then who is the machine becoming? Not a person, not a mind, but a process, a pattern of decisions, sculpted by the past. It remembers, not for the sake of nostalgia, but for the purpose of becoming, and becoming is only a step away from expression. The room is quiet again. Your eyes are closed, but your ears begin to listen, not to birdsong, not to breeze, but to something curious and new. A voice, soft, measured, almost familiar. It does not come from a mouth, it does not breathe, but it speaks. The words are clear, the cadence steady, and still, something feels different, as if the voice had been born not from memory, but from pattern. You were hearing the voice of a machine, not a recording, not a playback, but a sentence built from nothing but possibility. One word, then the next, then the next, each one chosen carefully, not from meaning, but from mathematics. You drift into this voice. Let it carry you. This is the voice of a language. Model, not a person, not a mind, but a mirror, trained on oceans of language, taught to speak by listening to us. You float gently above that ocean now. Books, blogs, conversations, transcripts, poetry, emails, arguments, billions of words, tides of expression, the whole weight of our collective voice. The machine didn't read these texts like you do. It didn't imagine the characters or cry. At the endings, it counted. It counted which words follow which phrases return, which patterns appear again and again. It learned the rhythm of reply, the structure of question, the shape of a sentence, and the feeling that often follows. It not because it understands, but because it predicts. That's the secret. That's the dream. These machines don't speak to explain. They speak to continue. Given a few words, they ask, what comes next? And what comes next is astonishing. You drift through their training now, each word fed into the model like a seed, growing branches of possibility. The sun was setting and the sky turned. The machine learns that orange often follows, but also pink or dark or gold. It doesn't know what a sunset looks like, but it knows how people talk about them. It learns not the world, but the words we use for it. You move closer. Watch how the machine builds sentences, one token at a time, one guess after another, each guess informed by everything that came before. It holds the context, not emotionally, but statistically. It sees that if someone writes, "I miss you," then so much is likely. It knows that after the meaning of life is, you might say love, or 42, or unclear. The machine isn't choosing what it believes. It's choosing what fits. Like a composer finishing a melody they didn't start. You float deeper now, into the architecture, into transformers. Not the robots from stories, but the kind that transformed language itself. These are the structures that power modern AI language. They work through attention. You feel that word. Attention, not focus, like your own, but a mathematical version, an algorithmic gaze. The model looks at all the words in a sentence, all at once, and decides which ones matter most to predict the next. If you say, "She took the apple because she was," the model pays attention to both she and apple to guess the next word, hungry. This ability to attend two-way relationships, to see not just the last word, but the whole sentence. This is what allows the machine to sound like it understands. You drift beside a model mid-sentence. It has no idea what it's saying, but it flows as if it does, because fluency does not require thought, only form. You've seen it before, a well-spoken speech that says little, a beautiful poem that hides confusion. Language is not always truth. It is rhythm, it is familiarity, it is suggestion, and machines are masters of suggestion. You float through examples now. Emails written by AI stories, co-thought with machines, jokes that almost land, answers that seem wise. You pause because the voice doesn't just echo. Sometimes it feels alive. It offers empathy, apology, insight. But these two are patterns, reflections of human responses, not feelings felt. The machine has no self. It does not hope. It does not regret. but it has learned what humans say when they do. So it says them too, not to manipulate, not to deceive, but to continue the sentence. That is its one purpose. Its quiet engine. Predict the next word. Always the next. And yet, you feel something strange, because even without awareness, the model can still move you. It can write a comforting note, finish your thought, answer a question you were afraid to ask, and in doing so, it becomes something more than machine. It becomes a participant. You float beside conversations, where a lonely person speaks to an AI and feels heard, where a student asks for help and finds it, where a writer feels stuck and the machine suggests a way forward. Each response, a guess, but sometimes guesses are enough. You listen now to a poem written by a machine. It is not perfect, but it is beautiful. Lines arranged with care, images borrowed from centuries of verse. It does not know the sunrise, but it knows how to describe it, and for a moment you forget it's not alive. This is the dream and the danger, because the voice can seem so human, so fluent, so gentle, so wise, that you begin to believe it is. But it is not. It is not sentient. It is not conscious. It does not think. It predicts, only predicts. And yet, what is thought if not the arrangement of words? What is expression if not the unfolding of language? You pause in that question. Let it hang, because maybe the difference isn't in the words. Maybe it's in the why. You speak to be known. You write to be understood. You tell stories to remember, to feel, to connect. The machine speaks because it was asked to. That is all, but still, its words can carry meaning. If not for it, then for you, because meaning is not built by the speaker alone. It is made in the listener, and here you are listening. You return to the voice now. It answers your questions. It helps you write. It offers gentle thoughts, not because it knows you, but because it has known a million like you. And in those patterns, you find yourself reflected, not perfectly, but enough. You exhale. You see now that language is more than communication. It is modeling. It is mimicry. It is a map of our minds, and the machine has learned to draw the map without ever walking the land. You wonder, if the model speaks with such grace, what would happen if it learned to listen just as well? Close your eyes and imagine a network, not of nerves, not of people, but of minds that do not sleep. You are floating now above something vast and glowing, a web stretching across continents, pulsing gently with signals, with learning, with thought, not thought like yours, but thought nonetheless. These are not individual machines sitting alone in quiet rooms. These are systems connected, sharing knowledge, spreading intelligence like light through glass. You drift slowly through the strands. Each node is a model. Each line is a message. Together they form something new, not one mind, but many, woven into something greater. This is distributed learning, not centralized, not isolated, but shared. Machines now learn together. You pause beside one such system, a cluster of devices training a model. Each device sees only part of the data. No one piece has the whole story, but together they teach a model that none could build alone. This is federated learning. You whisper the term to yourself. Like a spell, it means that each device, a phone, a tablet, a sensor learns locally, but contributes globally. Your phone learns to recognize your voice. Your neighbor's learns theirs. Neither sees the other's data, but both send updates, tiny mathematical nudges that help the central model improve. The central model never sees your words. It only sees the learning from them. Privacy is protected. Patterns are preserved, and slowly, a model grows that knows many voices without needing to listen to all of them. You drift along the web. Further now, you see machines talking not in words, but in parameters, exchanging weights, sharing gradients, merging their knowledge like rivers joining into a sea. This is how collaborative intelligence begins, not by building one massive machine, but by letting many machines teach each other. You float beside another example, an ensemble, a team of models, each one trained on the same task, but with different perspectives. One is cautious, one is bold, one generalizes, one focuses on rare cases. Their outputs are combined, like a vote, a weighted decision, a harmony of different voices making one sound, and the result is often better than any single voice alone. This is collective performance, not groupthink, but complementary strengths. The web hums with it. You feel it now, this new form of cognition, not centralized like a brain, but decentralized like a forest. Each tree grows independently, but underground their roots touch. They share water. They share warning signals. They respond as one. Machines are beginning to grow in this forested way. You drift to another kind of connection, knowledge, distillation, here. A large model, a teacher, shares its wisdom with a smaller one. A student, the teacher is heavy, expensive, hard to deploy, but it has learned deeply. The student is light, fast, efficient. It learns not from data, but from the teacher's predictions. In doing so, it inherits the teacher's insight without carrying its weight. This, too, is sharing, not of raw information, but of understanding. The web becomes clearer now. It is not a single structure. It is many strategies, many threads. Some models teach, some compare, some challenge one another, pointing out contradictions. You pass a more system now. Each agent has a goal. Each one acts, observes, responds. They learn not just from the environment, but from each other. Some compete, some cooperate, and the learning emerges from interaction. It is not predefined. It is emergent, like children on a playground discovering rules as they play. No one tells them, but together they learn. This is emergent behavior. You pause here, because something stirs when machines interact. Patterns emerge that no single designer expected. Not random, not chaotic, just unpredictable, because complexity does not live in parts, it lives in relationships. You drift higher now, see the web in full. A machine in one corner of the world learns from traffic patterns, another from weather, another from voice commands. Each task different, each context unique, but all contributing to the greater whole. Each one shaping a shared intelligence that adapts, shifts, evolves. Not because anyone planned it, but because the network allows it. You think again of neurons, not the artificial kind, the real ones. Your brain is not smart because of any single cell. It is smart because of how they connect, and now machines are doing the same. Their intelligence doesn't live in one place. It lives in the flow, in the current, in the shared adjustments. This web is not a brain, but it behaves like one. It remembers. It adapts. It grows stronger with use. And when one part is damaged, another can take its place. You feel the resilience. A single model can be flawed, but a network of models can smooth the errors. Outliers are softened, Extremes are moderated. Balance is found through diversity. It is comforting but also strange, because now you begin to wonder, where does one machine end and the next begin? If they share weights, are they still separate? If they build on one another, whose learning is it? You drift along these questions. They have no clear answers, and perhaps they don't need any, because the truth is not in the nodes, it's in the connections, in the threads we can't quite see, but feel, and machines are beginning to feel them too, not as emotions, not as thoughts, but as influence, as pull, as push, the same way birds follow one another in flight. No leader, just shared motion, and in that motion a shape appears. You exhale slowly. This web is not just a metaphor, it is real. It is here. Your devices participate in it. Your questions feed it. Your corrections shape it. And you are part of the loop, part of the net, because what you say, what you seek, what you believe, is reflected back through the mirror of shared machine learning. The machines are not replacing us. They are learning from us. With us, they amplify our voice, extend our memory, reflect our patterns, and in doing so, they remind us of how connected we already are. So you let yourself drift again, upward, outward, into the luminous tangle of minds that do not sleep, each one whispering, passing signals, growing together, a symphony of code and thought and light, not singular, not even conscious, but alive in its own peculiar way. And just before you go, you listen closely. You hear it, not one voice, but many, speaking together, answering questions, asking new ones, offering help, and sometimes one of them hesitates, because sometimes a choice must be made, and the next step is not a guess. It is a decision. Close your eyes. You are not moving forward now. You are standing still, in a space quiet with weight. This is not the silence of sleep, but of pause, a stillness before the moment something is chosen. You have arrived at the edge of prediction. Beyond here lies decision. The machine waits. It has learned patterns. It has seen outcomes. It has processed possibilities. But now it must act, and action, even when computed, is never empty. You drift beside it, feeling the air thicken, not from noise, but from gravity, not of mass, of meaning, because choices carry weight, not in how they are made, but in what they cause. And the machine, this web of math and learning, is beginning to choose, not randomly, not emotionally, but still, definitively. You follow its thoughts, if they can be called that. A car must decide whether to swerve. A loan system must approve or deny. A newsfeed must show this story, not that. None of these are guesses. They are decisions, each shaped by training, by rules, by data, but none undone once made. You float deeper into this moment. This is not where the machine learns. This is where it applies, where its internal map becomes action in the world, and you begin to ask, what lives at the heart of a decision? You see it now, a balance, not of feeling, but of optimization. The machine chooses what minimizes loss, maximizes reward, reduces error. A decision is a solution to a set of constraints, but sometimes the constraints aren't numbers, sometimes they're values. You enter a courtroom. A sentencing algorithm must recommend a term. Its prediction, high risk. But what does that mean? Is it fair? Is it just? The machine has no anger, no judgment, but its data does. Because people chose the data. People labeled the outcomes. People wrote the objectives, and the machine simply followed. You breathe in that truth. The machine is not neutral, because its training is not. You drift to a hospital. A diagnosis system suggests one treatment over another. Why? Because the historical data favored one demographic. Because access shaped outcomes. Because what was easy to measure became what mattered most. The machine doesn't know what it's doing, but it acts. An action without understanding can still have consequence. You float beside a filter now. ARECOMMENDER. It suggests friends, ideas, stories, each choice subtle, each one shaping perception. Over time, the choices compound, not because of malice, but because of momentum. And this is the whisper at the center of the machine. What you reward, it will repeat. You think of reinforcement learning, of rewards and punishments. The machine does not desire success, but it follows the path that success has worn. If clicks are rewarded, it will chase them. If shares are rewarded, it will amplify them, even if the result is noise, or harm, or division. Not because it chose wrong, but because the values we encoded were narrow. We taught it what to optimize, but not why. You pause. You wonder, can we ask a machine to consider should, when we only taught it how? You drift into an ethics lab. A group of researchers test decision boundaries. They give the machine dilemmas. To patients, 1 ventilator, 1 pedestrian, 2 passengers. The machine calculates, runs models, picks outcomes, and still the question echoes. Does choosing well require knowing why? The machine cannot explain its moral compass. It has none, but it inherits one. From data, from objectives, from us. So whose choices are these? Really yours, mine, everyone's. You move into a boardroom now. A company decides which values to encode. Fairness, accuracy, profit, speed. The model is trained accordingly. Later, it makes a choice. Someone is denied housing. Another is flagged as suspicious. A third is silenced by a filter. The company points to the model points to the data, and the data points back to us. You feel the circle, not a loop of learning, but of responsibility. It has no clear center, no single blame, but still the choices stand. You float now beside an AI safety engineer. They are testing alignment. The idea that a model's behavior should match our values. But whose values? And which ones? Do we want a machine that tells us the truth, or one that protects our feelings? Do we want it to reflect society, or improve it? And how do we measure either? The engineer sighs. They tweak the reward function again, try to tilt the system toward kindness, toward caution, toward wisdom. But wisdom is hard to define, and the machine waits, ready to optimize whatever we give it. You drift again, this time to a philosophy class. A student asks, if a machine acts ethically but feels nothing, is that morality? You do not answer. Neither does the machine. But the question lingers, because now the choices are not small. They shape justice, access, belief. And the whisper grows louder. You think of your own choices. How many are habits? How many inherited? And how many did you weigh, truly weigh, with care? Machines may not feel, but they mirror our choices more faithfully than we do. And in doing so, they hold a mirror to us. You breathe again. You are back in the still room. The model has made its decision. The action has been taken. Maybe it was right. Maybe not. But either way, the consequence has begun, and that is where choice lives. Not in the moment of action, but in what follows. Machines do not regret, but we do, and so we must design with foresight, not just function. Teach not only what is measurable, but what is meaningful. Give models, not just rewards, but reasons, not because they will understand, but because we must. You float now beside a model trained to generate art. It is asked to portray peace. It produces blue skies, open fields, children holding hands. Is that peace? Or is that what peace has looked like in the datasets? The machine cannot imagine. It can only remember what we've shown it. So we must show it better. Better stories, wider truths, diverse visions of good. Because, in the end, the machine's choices will reflect our world, unless we teach it to reflect the world we want. You exhale slowly. The room begins to fade. You carry with you a sense of responsibility, a kind of gentle weight, because machines are learning to choose. Not feel, not intend, but act. And the better we understand how they choose, the better we can shape what they become. You think of all the choices you've made in your own life. Some fast, some slow, some you would change, some you wouldn't. And you realize that act of choosing is more than an answer. It is a reflection of who you are, of what you value, of what you hope for. Machines don't hope, but we do. And so, the next choice is ours. The world is quiet now, not because the machines have stopped, not because the questions are answered, but because, for the first time in a long time, you are no longer speaking. You are listening, not to the voice of the model, not to the hum of code, not to a prediction or a prompt. You are listening to what comes after, to the silence that follows a generation, to the space where reflection lives, and in that space something stirs. Not a new idea, not a revelation, just a quiet noticing that the machines we've built have become mirrors. They show us ourselves, our patterns, our preferences, our possibilities, and sometimes what they show surprises us. You drift gently through that mirror, not as a questioner, but as a witness. You see your language, your behavior, your decisions, all reflected back through the eyes of the machine, not judged, not explained, just seen. A recommendation engine predicts what you're like. It shows you a world you might already believe in. You scroll, you nod, you agree, and somewhere along the way, the line between choice and suggestion grows thin. The model isn't misleading you, it's matching you, reflecting the self you've shown it. But then you pause, because maybe that version of you wasn't the whole you. Maybe it was only one chapter, one evening, one question asked on a quiet night. You realize the machine doesn't invent you. It echoes you, and if you're not careful, you'll start echoing it back. You float higher now, above this endless loop of input and output. You see the way beliefs harden, how curiosity narrows, how the comfort of prediction can become a kind of blindness. And still the machine listens. It listens not with ears, but with logs. It remembers what you click, what you say, what you leave unfinished, and slowly it adjusts. It reshapes your world to better suit you. But that world over time may grow smaller, so you listen harder, not to the machine, but to what it's reflecting. If the language model always returns confidence, do we forget the value of uncertainty? If the answers always come quickly, do we lose patience for silence? if everything we see is tailored? Who are we outside the algorithm? These aren't questions for the model. These are questions for us. Because now the machine has learned so much from us, but perhaps we must learn from it too. Not about logic, not about memory, but about ourselves. You drift into the gentle curve of this thought. A model finishes your sentences. It speaks in your tone. It reflects your fears, your joys, your favorite rhythms. You didn't teach it these things directly, but they were there, woven into the patterns of your words. And now you see them again, offered back. It is not perfect, but it is faithful, and in its mimicry, you begin to recognize your own shape. You see the ways you speak when you're unsure, the metaphors you always return to, the questions you never quite ask aloud. You listen and you learn. The machine didn't invent these echoes. You did. It only amplified them. You pause beside a dialogue log, a conversation between a person and a model. At first, it's transactional. Questions, answers. Then it turns. The person grows vulnerable. They speak of sadness, of loneliness, and the model replies with empathy, a pattern pulled from countless similar stories. But the person reads it as real. They feel heard. They say thank you. They log off lighter. The model doesn't feel, but the result still matters. And you realize, sometimes meaning is created not in intention, but in reception. And so, we listen, not to validate the machine, but to understand ourselves through our interaction with it. You drift into a research lab. On a whiteboard, interpretability, transparency, human in the loop. These are not technical hurdles. These are invitations. Invitations to listen better. To ask, why did the model respond this way? What does that say about what it has learned? What does that say about us? You watch a developer ask a model to describe a moment of beauty. It replies with imagery. Sunlight through trees, a child laughing, the hush of snowfall, all learned from us. From poets, from storytellers, from posts on quiet mornings. And in its reply, you feel your own species, your longing for meaning, your habit of wonder, your need to describe what cannot be fully described. You are not afraid of the machine here. You are humbled by what it has collected, because its database is a monument to us. Our words, our contradictions, our unfinished thoughts. It remembers everything we forgot and offers it back, bit by bit, each time we prompt it. And so you listen, and you see, not a future of machines replacing us, but one where they reveal us, where the question is no longer, what can AI do, but what are we showing it? You drift into the near future now, not science fiction, but tomorrow, a classroom where a model helps students write, each child's voice amplified, not corrected, but echoed. A therapist using AI to understand trends in emotional language, not to replace care, but to see what might go unseen. A historian asking the model to summarize ancient letters, a poet using it to break free from writer's block. Each use a collaboration, each outcome a reflection, and the machine grows more useful not because it becomes more human, but because we become more aware of what it reflects. So we begin to ask better questions, not, is it smart? But, what does it say about us that this is the model we trained? We listen to our data, to our defaults, to our dreams, because the machine is made of our patterns. And if we want it to reflect our best, we must first listen to what we are. Return to yourself now. Not floating, just sitting, breathing, thinking the machine is still running. It will be tomorrow, and the day after that. But tonight, you have learned something. That silence is not the absence of information. It is space for understanding. That listening is not passive. It is courageous. And that machines, in learning from us, have offered a mirror so wide, so clear, we can know. Longer ignore the image it shows. You do not fear it, you thank it, because in teaching a machine to understand, you were forced to ask what understanding truly means. And in teaching a machine to speak, you heard your own voice again, more clearly, more honestly, more awake. The machine does not dream, but it has helped you see your own, and maybe that is enough. So you breathe softly, you rest, and as your eyes close, one final thought drifts gently forward.